and welcome to For Your Health, a show brought to you by Green Peak Alliance, an organization that builds healthy communities in East Central Vermont. I'm Elizabeth Kelsey, and today we're going to talk about the Vermont National Guard's deployment of many of its members abroad. Our guests are going to be Nick Thomas, Military and Family Readiness Specialist with Vermont Army National Guard, as well as Rachel Newton, whose spouse serves in the Vermont National Guard. We're going to be talking about the experiences of military families and how communities can support these families during deployment and always. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so Nick, I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little more about the deployment in Vermont in general. How many people are going to be deployed and some of the
Yeah, no
details?
problem. For sure. So in total, we're going to have just over 1,000 service members gone between both the Army and the air side of the house. Within the state of Vermont, within the National Guard, we've got an Army Guard and an Air Guard. And so both sets are on deployments this year. And those locations are going to be to US, Europe, Africa, and Central Commands.
Mm.
And the Air Guard actually started their deployment cycle this past fall, while the first Army units left roughly this January at the start of the year. The Air Guard is typically scheduled for 6-month deployments, where the Army is scheduled for roughly a year long, so 12 months on the Army side.
Yeah.
And in general, the members are going to be supporting a variety of missions while they're overseas, but in some ways, they're most likely going to be supporting base security functions. And so those are the typical locations, roughly how many service members and the missions that they're going to be supporting.
Mm-hmm. So many months that people will be away from their families, it sounds like.
It is. It's typically it's a big ask. It's quite the commitment on the family, but thankfully the National Guard does have programs and services to assist folks in that time of separation.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really important. Um, Perhaps Rachel, your spouse, your husband is in the National Guard. Perhaps you could start off by sharing what some of the challenges service people and their families experience in general, and what additional stressors may happen during times of deployment, just from what you observe.
Sure. So my husband's been in the Guard since 2003, and we've been married since 2006. So we've seen Guard life for about 15 years now. And one thing I've thought about is when he first joined, it was 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, and that was pretty consistent. And since then, it's turned into a lot more training, especially getting ready for a deployment. He has to do maybe it'll be 3 or 4 weekend days at a training, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And so it's a lot harder on the family or the employer trying to figure out how you can work that into your schedule. And then the knowing that an deployment's coming is tough because you're trying to figure out, how do I explain to my kids that daddy might be gone for a year? And then you try to figure out how to get everything all settled for it. So it could definitely be stressful getting ready for it.
Yeah, that does sound really stressful. Nick, what do you see in the families you work with, what they are experiencing?
The main thing that I'd like to highlight too is our National Guard families are just like any other family in the community. So the easiest way to explain it is, if you can expect it or experience it in your family at home, our Guard service members are experiencing the same thing. But potentially, as you noted, Rachel, the length of service, the time commitment away from home, typically exacerbates those potential issues, right? So being away from your loved ones, being away from your families can complicate things such as daycare schedules, employment schedules, and routines. And so, any issue that you could probably have in a normal family environment or setting, in the Guard, they can experience the same thing, but it can be exacerbated because of the time away. One of the challenges also is, if the service member is typically the one that does the bills or does anything, think about your home environment. If they do the repairs, if they do the bills, if they manage the daycare schedule, pickups, drop-offs, you're going to take that person out of the environment, and all of a sudden the spouse that's left behind or the family members that's left behind are going to have to band together and figure out how to best support the needs of the family without that person. And that can be very difficult. And I'm sure, Rachel, you can attest to that. No matter how much preparation or notice you get, the first week, the first days are definitely a shell shock, no matter what you do.
One thing I wanted to ask about regarding stressors is, our organization, Green Peak Alliance, we work on substance misuse prevention. And so our data show that the stressors associated with military life can lead to an increase in substance misuse. And I was just curious about either of you, if you had your thoughts on why this might be and how a deployment might further increase the risk.
Sure. So I think especially when you think about military and substance misuse, often I think about alcohol because it can be such a big part of social gatherings that it can be used in a very like normal ways. But that means it can also be easy, I think, for people to kind of hide in plain sight that they're struggling because if everyone around them is using in what would be considered a more moderate way, it might be easy for them to be struggling and nobody's realizing it. And alcohol is one of those things a lot of people use as a coping mechanism that's really not the healthiest one. So especially in the military, dealing with trauma or memories or the uncertainty, people can use alcohol to cope instead of finding other ways to cope with things.
That's a really great point. Thank you for mentioning that. Nick, do you have anything to add on that topic?
Yeah, sure. So, just as Rachel said, I'll take it in a somewhat different direction. I
Mhm,
believe the original question was focusing on potentially why that is. Like, why do we see a spike with this population?
mhm,
And I think it's because it's inherent in the duty and the job that they do. One thing that you'll often sometimes see is a correlation between mental health and substance abuse. And the nature of military service, you get put in your service sometimes can put you at risk for things such as PTSD, TBIs, that's a traumatic brain injury,
mhm.
and other types of things that you experience in a combat zone. And I should also mention, not even just a combat zone, a routine deployment to a relatively safe nation, you're still overseas for an entire year supporting a mission, and from time to time things can go left or right really quick. And so even if it's a non-combat related mission, just for instance staying up for 15 or 18 or however many hours in a shift doing security forces is a stressor. So in addition to the alcohol use and potential other substance abuse that most people will use and potentially cope with. On the military side of the house, you do have the additional risk for exposure to things that can trigger potentially mental health issues. And
Mhm.
then if you combine those two, I think that's where you see your statistics jump a little bit for this population.
Well, and I wonder too, the entire family system as well, the people who are stressed at home. I mean, if there's just stress involved in any aspect of the family, that raises the potential for substance abuse, unfortunately. And I just, yeah, it's probably something that we, keep in mind as we support um, everyone in the military and their communities. Is that sort of what you observe as well, that that the substance abuse can occur beyond just the people who are serving?
For sure. Yeah, it can occur with anyone in the family. Um, we really did touch on the coping mechanism, and I think at the heart of this particular issue with the military community, for those that are not in uniform, um, it's it can start out as harmless, such as a date night or a margarita night with your friends.
Mhm.
Um, but really, if you're going through a separation, especially a long-term separation, you have to kind of be mindful about the moderation and things like that. But I would imagine that just the stressor of the separation in general can lead to potential substance abuse. And again, like I said before, our families are no different than your families, but I will say they are under more stress.
Right. Can you talk about the Family Readiness Program and some of the initiatives you have to support families?
For sure, yeah. So within the National Guard, we have the Family Programs Office, and it's come leaps and leaps and bounds, and I'm sure Rachel, you'll be able to attest to this. Even since 2010, and even since 2003, the initial invasion of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and so Family Programs is an office headquartered out of Camp Johnson, but we support throughout the state. And it's an umbrella approach program where we have military and family readiness specialists, such as myself, that operate military and family readiness centers throughout the state. We have 5 of them. I'm at the White River Junction location. We have one in Rutland, Lyndonville, up in St. Albans, as well as Joint Force Headquarters and at Camp Ethan Allen Training Site in Jericho. And so the specialists assist the community, spouses, family members, and dependents with any issue. We are resource and referral specialists. We partner with the community to try to encourage strong, healthy communities. For instance, in the White River Junction area, the Upper Valley Haven gave out turkeys to those that are in need of turkeys this past Thanksgiving. And I was able to be a part of that. And the cool thing was, veterans came through just as much as other people. And I was able to connect with veterans in the community.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the military and family readiness team, we have the Veterans Outreach Team, which is a completely unique program to the state of Vermont. And we have individuals like myself, they're Veterans Outreach Specialists that are also located throughout the state that work with our veteran population. So not only do we have the military and family readiness staff for our in uniform soldiers, but we're also taking care of the veterans once they separate. But we also have programs and other associated services, such as a personal financial counselor. Anyone connected with the Guard going through this deployment can get access to the financial counselor to figure out their bills. Personally speaking, I used to be the career readiness counselor prior to this job. So I'm a professional resume writer also by trade, and I can help folks find jobs. We have a mental health counselor that's a non-medical, so free, confidential. If you're dealing with the COVID lockdown, if you're dealing with seasonal depression or separation anxieties, any of that stuff, we have all access to within family programs, as well as a child and youth program to put on camps so our kiddos can get together. Military kids often can seem a little isolated because sometimes, given the rural nature of our state, they may be the only military kid in their school. But our child and youth camps bring those kids together. And in a non-COVID world, they'll be doing summer camps, they'll be running around, meeting each other, learning resilience skills. But even during COVID, we did camps in a box. And our child and youth program lead was able to send out summer camps that did some Zoom and some webinar type camps with activities that were mailed to the households. And I think I can go on and on and on and take up a lot of your time, but family programs really has a robust program for our families.
That's great that you're doing so much. That sounds tremendously helpful. Rachel, did you have anything to add about that?
Just as Nick mentioned, we can be really isolated where we are. My husband works in White River and we live in Pownell, so we aren't really close to any of his military friends. So things like the FRG really help to keep us together and keep us connected with everybody else.
Great. And just lastly, can you both provide some advice or guidance on how communities, schools, individuals such as extended family, friends, neighbors can support military families during these times of deployment, or generally just practical things they can do, everyday things?
Sure. So a couple of things I've thought about is one, don't ask really specific questions about where our soldiers are going, because we're not going to be able to tell you. Just ask how we're doing. How is the soldier doing? It's good to ask, check in with us, but we can't tell you every movement that they're making.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've thought about some of the different ways the community's connected with me over the years, and there's been some really neat programs that have happened. I had a school do a free military spa day, and so anyone related to the military could go get their hair done or their nails done one day, and it was really, really fun to get together. I had seen that we have people in Pownell doing an indoor tag sale to save up money, and all the money is going towards buying things for the deployment for the soldiers, so they can have care packages. So things that show the community is really trying to step up and help out the soldiers and the families is really, really neat.
Nice.
Yeah, and I could piggyback off of that. I think the main thing to take away for the community out there is that a lot of the time our military families are super proud to serve, and they'll say it a million times. One thing that they are not so good at is asking for resources, asking for help, or even asking for a military discount. So if you're going to be if you're a business owner, if you're a community member, if you're seeing this and you want to help, just by advertising and offering some type of benefit for the military service community so that our families can know where it's at. And then for me on my end, as the specialist that works within the Vermont Guard, I can pick up on that and then blast it out to the families. That's a big help for us because, again, military families will tell you all day how great our service is and how proud we are to serve, but we also potentially might not ask for benefits or ask for those discounts. So being able to be transparent with what you'd like to offer and potentially sending that stuff to family programs so we can push it out to our families, that would be great.
Excellent. And I think you had some information on how to contact family programs. And so we'll include that, but I would also feel free if you'd like to mention it now as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the two primary, well, three primary methods is we do have a website, and our website will list all of those services that I spoke about. It's www.ngfamily.vt.gov. And we do have a Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/VTNG Family Programs. And if you hit both of those places, you can get all of the resources and access to events going on, webinars, things that we're doing, as well as more information on those resources. And if you happen to see this and you are within the National Guard and you're a family and you need support, we do have a 24/7, 365 call line for support. The best part about this number is it's answered by somebody 24/7, 365 locally here in Vermont at the National Guard Family Programs Office to assist you with the resources and referrals that you may need. And that number is 888-607-8773. And again, we'll make sure that that information is on the screen.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for your time and for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end the show?
No, thank you so much for having me on. Like Nick said, we aren't always the best at asking for help, but we are so proud of our military and so proud of our soldiers and are happy to be doing it no matter how hard it is.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for having us and sharing the story is super important. And anyone that takes their time out of their day to learn a little bit more about the National Guard and what we do for the state is awesome. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.